Welcome to the Digital Accommodations Overview for the SAT Suite of Assessments. This presentation will cover the following topics: ensuring that the appropriate accommodations are requested, approved, and configured as needed for students with documented disabilities, a brief overview of the AIR test delivery applications, an overview of Digital Schools Test Coordinator and SSD Coordinator roles, including assigned user roles and permissions, an understanding of common accommodations for digital testing in the SAT suite with a description of the digital accommodations and accessibility tools, including universal tool sets and embedded versus non-embedded accommodations and supports. Next, we will look at how to manage student test settings in the AIR Test Information Distribution Engine. We will review the SSD online requirements and policy for digital accommodations, with a review of digital alternatives to paper-based accommodations, and how paper testing will be an accommodation request for digital testing. We will review which digital accommodations are allowed in the standard room. Finally, we will discuss the need for pre-testing students to ensure functionality with assistive technologies and to help students become more familiar with the test environment. And additional resources and an appendix is provided for reference. Testing accommodations for students with documented disabilities are available on all College Board exams, but Services for Students with Disabilities, SSD, approves accommodations for only some of them, such as CB approval required, SAT and PSAT 10. Accommodations approved by schools, PSAT 8-9. Note, once approved by the College Board, accommodations can be used on all of these exams. You don't have to make a new request. Therefore, if a student has a documented disability, IEP, or 504 plan, it is best to start the approval process as early as possible to ensure that the student has the required accommodation for any tests that they may take, including SAT and SAT subject tests, PSAT and MSQT and PSAT 10, AP exams. Timeline. The request process can take 7 weeks and does not begin until all required documentation is received. If additional documentation is required, or if a request is resubmitted, approval can take 7 more weeks. It is recommended that all configurations in the test platform be set up at least 24 hours before test day. AIR test delivery applications. All of AIR's applications are web-based and includes the Test Information Distribution Engine, aka TIDE, which supports test coordinators throughout the testing process. TIDE includes features which allow test coordinators to manage user and student information, monitor test progress, and execute administrative functions. The Test Administration, or TA interface, allows proctors to administer and monitor the student testing on test day. The College Board, or CB Secure Browser, or the Student Testing Application, is used for the pre-administration and student testing. Schools must have the CB Secure Browser installed on all test-taking computers before administration activities can begin. Please note that the expression student site, student interface, student testing application, and secure browser are used synonymously. Also, please be aware that states that currently use an AIR secure browser must also install the CB Secure Browser in order to administer the SAT and PSAT tests. Lastly, we have the Digital Test Preview, which allows both students and staff the opportunity to practice taking and administering the digital test with all test day testing features. The Digital Test Preview is a great opportunity for students with accommodations with assistive technology to pre-test the functionality. Links to all the applications will be available on the Digital Testing portal. Access to TIDE, the TA interface, and the CB Secure Browser or Student Testing Application requires login credentials, while the Digital Test Preview is publicly accessible. User roles and permissions. Each user has a role, such as a district-level user or a test administrator level user. Each role has an associated list of permissions to access certain AIR systems and features. Test coordinators and SSD coordinators, as users of the applications, have the system role of digital administrator and can access the test administration interface to administer tests and the TIDE interface to manage student information, student test settings, manage rosters, monitor test progress, and print test tickets. The proctor, as a user of the applications, have the same role of proctor and can access the test administration interface to administer tests and the TIDE interface to view student information, student test settings, and rosters. Coming in spring 2019, a new role for the EL coordinator will be created with similar roles and permissions as the SSD coordinator in order to manage and provide designated supports for English learners. Determining digital accommodations. Follow similar considerations as any and all accommodations through the SSD online process. The accommodations that schools request for students for the SAT suite of assessments should be consistent with the accommodations they use for taking assessments in school. We recognize that some terminology used in the creation of an IEP or 504 plan may differ from the College Board nomenclature. Digital accommodations will not appear in SSD online, but the digital alternatives will be accepted. For example, students who typically had assessments administered with the MP3 audio format will be able to test digitally with the text-to-speech accommodation. Students who typically had assessments administered with the ATC format and/or the Braille format will be able to test digitally with the assistive technology test setting with Braille figure supplements. The school can determine the best option in consultation with the student and family. Universal tools, digital accommodations, and non-embedded accommodations and tools. The digital embedded accommodations are similar to the accommodations provided for the paper and pencil administration, but simply delivered through the testing platform. The universal tools and accommodations that are digitally delivered components of the AIR test delivery system include embedded universal tools, which are available to all students based on student preference and are provided as digitally delivered components of the AIR test delivery system. Accommodations are available for students for whom there is a documentation of the need for these accommodations and are provided as digitally delivered components of the AIR test delivery system. Non-embedded universal tools and accommodations are delivered outside the testing application. Non-embedded universal tools, which are available outside the test delivery system and can include scratch paper, bilingual glossaries, and translated test directions for EL students, handheld calculator for math calculator section, etc. Non-embedded accommodations are available outside the test delivery system and can include separate setting, scribe, reader, paper braille test forms, etc. The various tools, accommodations, and supports include universal tools not requiring CB approval, or configuration in the testing application include Mark for Review, Online Calculator for the Math Test Calculator section, Notes, Highlighter, Line Reader, Strike Through, Student Clock, Zoom In, Zoom Out. The digital accommodations that require approval, CB approved or state allowed, and configuration in the testing platform include assistive technology, color contrast, font size, masking, mouse pointer, streamline mode, text-to-speech, and four-function calculator. In addition, it will be necessary to document in the TIDE system any non-embedded accommodations and tools that will be administered, such as modified settings, use of a reader or scribe, handheld calculator, translated test directions, word-to-word glossaries, etc. Embedded universal tools. A list of universal tools available in the test delivery system include calculator for math test calculator only, an embedded on-screen digital calculator for calculator allowed items that appears when students click on the calculator button. Note, for function calculator available in the math test no calculator section is for students with prior approval. Context menu. This menu allows a student to access test directions and tools such as a highlighter, strike through, and mark for review. Expand button, a feature that allows a student to expand a passage section or the question section for easier readability. Highlighter, a feature for marking desired text, items, or response options with a color. Line reader, a feature that a student can use as a guide when reading text. Mark for review, a tool that allows the student to flag items for future review during the assessment. Navigation buttons, buttons that allow a student to move between test pages, either forward to the next question or back to the previous question. Notes, a feature that a student can use as virtual scratch paper to make notes. Questions drop-down list, a list that allows a student to quickly navigate to specific test questions. Questions that were marked for review display marked in this list. Strike through, a feature that a student may use to eliminate those answer choices that seem incorrect. Student clock, displays the amount of time allowed for the test section. Upon starting the test, the student clock will begin to count down. At 5 minutes remaining, the student clock will turn red and provide a pop-up warning message. Zoom in, zoom out, a feature that enlarges the text and images on a test page. Embedded universal tools. Images of the universal tools in the navigation bar and the context menu are provided as an example of how students engage with the student testing applications. The images are from the Student Digital Test Preview, and the global menu may change based on the test that you're taking. For example, the math test may include a calculator and formula sheet, which you will not see on the reading, writing, and language or optional essay. Types of College Board digital accommodations. We begin with the category of accommodations that integrate with assistive technology. The assistive technology, or AT accommodation, is the digital version of the test, an alternative to the ATC format delivered in the student testing application. It enables the use of assistive technology software and hardware, example, screen readers, refreshable braille devices, etc. Like the ATC format accommodation, it must be given with 100% extended time on the writing and language section and standard time for all other sections unless approved for extended time. The permissive mode is a test setting that is applicable for students who use any pre-approved hardware or software with a secure browser. It is automatically set for students with the AT accommodations as mentioned above. Student receives time and breaks in accordance to documented need. The next category for the types of College Board digital accommodations is the visual assistance tools that include color contrast, which displays the test with a different background or font color. All available options are listed and examples are provided in the appendix section. The mouse pointer, adjust the mouse cursor to match color and size preference in accordance to the color contrast and font size accommodations. All available options are provided in the slide. Additional visual assistance tools include Streamline mode. Items are presented sequentially without a split screen. For example, items with passage sets will display the passage above the items. This is automatically set with the assistive technology accommodation because the typical behavior of screen readers is to read from top to bottom and left to right, and this presentation style works best. It is also required for Zoom font size greater than level 4. The various Zoom levels are presented. Keep in mind that they must be manually set in Tide. The Zoom font size accommodation sets font size test content presented in accordance to documented need. It is the digital alternative to large print. All available options are listed on the size, and comparable print size equivalencies are provided in the appendix. The next digital accommodation category is the auditory assistance tools, which include text-to-speech or TTS, which allows parts of the test to be read in the student testing platform. TTS is the digital alternative to MP3 format. In order for the TTS to be properly set, you must first select the On option and then the TTS rule for how it should render for each test section. Students receive extended time and extra breaks based on the TTS rule, read text only or read text and graphics on all sections. The text-to-speech rule determines which parts of the test are read aloud, with options that include read text only, default, student receives 50% extended time. Read text and graphics, student receives 100% extended time. Optimized for screen reader, automatically set for assistive technology accommodation. Another digital accommodation category is the concentration assistance tools, which includes masking that allows students to block off answer choices or any parts of the test content. An example of the masking tool is provided in the next section on managing student test settings in Tide. Starting in fall 2018, a 4-function online calculator is available for use on the Math Test No Calculator section with prior approval. The last category of the digital accommodations is the timing, which includes many of the same options that are available in SSD Online with a few additions. Standard time, default, no approval required. Standard time with breaks. Student will receive standard time with breaks that may include extra breaks, extended breaks, breaks as needed, etc. Approval required. 50% extended time. Students will receive 50% extended time for all applicable sections with approved extra breaks. 100% extended time. Student will receive 100% extended time for all applicable sections with approved extra breaks. The following timing configurations are also available in the digital testing platform, but are not available options in the SSD online process. 150% extended time. Student will receive 150% extended time for all applicable sections with approved extra breaks. Can be requested in SSD online under the greater than 100% option with documentation required. 200% extended time. Student will receive 200% extended time for all applicable sections with approved extra breaks. Can be requested in SSD online under the greater than 100% option with documentation required. And the last option, other with documentation. Student will receive time and breaks based on the documentation needed. Can be requested in SSD online under the greater than 100% option with documentation required. Note, students must use the entire time for which they are approved. Student will automatically be approved with extra breaks for any of the extended time configurations. Managing student test settings. Now that we have completed the overview of the digital accommodations, the following slides provide information about the Tide applications and how to manage test settings. All student test settings information, example, extended time, TTS, etc., must be configured in Tide before test day to ensure student access to the digital test. Tide synchronizes with the secure browser and TA interface to accurately reflect all student information across all testing applications. Some accessibility features must be enabled before test day for individual students testing with accommodations. The Test Settings and Tools dropdown allows the test coordinators and SSD coordinators to view and edit accessibility features and accommodations for students allowed to test with an accommodation. The accommodation settings in TIDE include all of the accommodation categories we covered previously, including state or College Board approved accommodations, integration with assistive technology, visual assistance tools, auditory assistance tools, concentration assistance tools, timing scheduling tools, general testing tools. Note, there are 3 sets of attributes in TIDE that can be configured at a student level: accommodation type, non-embedded accommodations, EL supports coming spring 2019, accommodation test settings. Please remember that for SAT and PSAT 10, the accommodations should be requested approved by SSD prior to entering the settings in the TIDE application. When each section is fully expanded, you can view the available options, including the student's demographic information. The following slides will provide further details for each of the accommodation settings. The TIDE system does not currently have integration with SSD data. Test coordinators and SSD coordinators are instructed to identify whether any of the accommodations and settings are College Board approved or state allowed, and to specify if any of the accommodations are non-embedded. For example, permission for food, medication, wheelchair accessibility, preferential seating, sign language interpreter for test directions, etc. Accommodations for the SAT and PSAT 10 must be approved by the College Board Services for Students with Disabilities. Student accommodations for the PSAT 8-9 are decided by the student's school and do not need to be reviewed by the College Board. Please note, state-allowed accommodation. Student test scores are not eligible to be reported to colleges, universities, or scholarship organizations. For any accommodations being administered that are not listed in the accommodation sections, such as modified settings, reader, scribe, paper test books, etc., test coordinators or SSD coordinators should select Yes for non-embedded accommodations. This information was previously covered, but it bears repeating as it is an important step in the test settings process that should not be overlooked. The assistive technology. When set to on, it enables the use of assistive technology software and hardware, including screen readers, JAWS, NVDA, VoiceOver, Zoom text, etc., refreshable Braille devices, and other technology designated to support individuals with severe vision impairment or blindness in order to enable access to a computer. The AT accommodation, when turned on, will include the relevant TTS accommodations. Example, on and optimized for screen reader and enable for permissive mode. Test coordinators or SSD coordinators will not have to set these tools when the assistive technology is enabled for each of the test sections. The permissive mode allows students with screen readers or other assistive technology to integrate with the secure browser. The visual assistance tools, including color contrast, mouse pointer, streamline mode, and zoom font size, can be allowed in the standard room if no other accommodation is given that would require being placed in a non-standard room. A screenshot of the test setting category of the visual assistance tool is presented to show how to enable these accommodations. TTS technology, or speech synthesis, provides textual alternatives to written text and non-text content in digital assessments. Verbalizations or audio presentation of text can be useful to students who are unable to access test content due to visual disabilities. Example, students who are blind or visually impaired, or due to learning disabilities. Example, students who have difficulties decoding words in the process of reading. Text-to-speech, TTS. The TTS accommodation provides a delivery mechanism for audio presentation for students not using a screen reader. TTS also allows the student to control aspects of text delivery, such as what is read, and, depending on the platform, the voice. Text-to-speech rules. Read text only. This rule enables the native screen reader software to read the text on the screen and only the text on graphics. It is intended for a variety of student disabilities, including visual, cognitive, or print. Read text and graphics. This rule enables the native screen reader software to read the text on screen and the alternative text descriptions for graphics. It is intended for a variety of student disabilities, including visual, cognitive, or print. Optimized for screen readers. This rule is only enabled for integration with the assistive technology devices, including screen readers, example JAWS, NVDA, etc., and refreshable braille displays, RBDs, to read the text on screen and the alternative text descriptions for graphics. It is intended for students with visual impairment who are using AT devices. Refer to the AT resource guide at digitaltesting.collegeboard.org for required computer configuration for TTS. The only concentration tool available in the digital testing application is masking. It can be used with items, options, and/or passages. The timing scheduling tool provides various timing options based on the documented need. Because of the variety of timing requirements for various accommodations, the SAT, PSAT 8-9, and PSAT 10 Digital Accommodated Testing Manual provides several different test administration scripts that can be used with the timing selections. Some important distinctions will need to be noted when setting up the various accommodated rooms, including no self-pacing. Students must sit for the entire duration of extended time requested. Students approved for extended time for reading must receive extended time on all sections of the test. Students with various section timings, example, extended time for math, EL students with 50% extended time, TTS rule-based timing, 50% or 100% extended time, should be placed in rooms that correspond to their specific requirements and accommodations. An embedded on-screen digital 4-function calculator is available in the Math Test No Calculator section. Coordinators should enable this tool for students who have received approval to use a 4-function calculator on Section 3, Math Test No Calculator. Accommodated timing for TTS and assistive technology, or AT accommodations. For text-to-speech, TTS accommodation, for the SAT, 50% or 100% extended time for TTS tests over 2 days. For PSAT 8-9, 50% or 100% extended time testing must occur on a single day. For PSAT 10, 50% or 100% extended time testers can test over 2 days with permission. For the assistive technology, students testing with an AT accommodation should test with standard time, with 100% extended time for the writing and language section, unless they are approved for an extended time accommodation. Test administrators, including proctors, SSD coordinators, etc., will be selecting the timing option designated for their room. Any students that have a different timing setting than what the room has been assigned will not be allowed to enter the test session. The TA interface will generate an error message if a student's timing settings do not match the timing settings on the test session. If a student needs to change rooms from standard to non-standard, no irregularity report, IR, is needed if the student can be readily assigned to an accommodated testing room that corresponds to their accommodation. Room changes must be made prior to the start of timed testing. If any student is moved to another room after the test has begun, the proctor is instructed to report this as an irregularity. The digital proctor clock is available in the TA interface for standard time only. The digital student clock is available in the student interface for all timing schedule variations. Students can hide or unhide the clock by simply clicking on it. This section provides information on the digital alternatives to paper-based accommodations. As a reminder, schools that are administering a digital test in the SAT suite of assessments should test all students in the digital mode. For those students approved to test on paper as an accommodation, those accommodated materials will be provided as ordered. Some possible guidelines, considerations for SSD decision making. If student is blind or has a significant visual impairment and reads or is learning to read Braille, the student may test with assistive technology optimized for screen reader with Braille figure supplement. If student has an identified reading-based disability that affects the student's decoding, fluency, or comprehension skills, the student may test with TTS Read Text Only or TTS Read Text and Graphics. If student uses text-to-speech, audiobooks, or receives a read-aloud accommodation during instruction, the student may test with TTS Read Text Only or TTS Read Text and Graphics. If student uses text-to-speech or receives a read-aloud accommodation during other accountability assessments, example, PARCC, Smarter Balanced, etc., or other class or district-wide assessments, the student may test with TTS Read Text Only or TTS Read Text and Graphics. If someone, teacher, paraprofessional, another student, parent, regularly reads aloud to the student in school as an instructional accommodation, the student may test with TTS Read Text Only or TTS Read Text and Graphics. If there are no other accommodations or student test settings, then students with the digital alternatives, including Zoom, color contrast, magnifier tool, and larger font size, and the other visual assistance and concentration tools, such as mouse pointer, streamline mode, and masking, are permitted to test in the digital standard rooms. These tools are embedded in the test delivery system. The Zoom and magnifier tools don't require setup, but a bigger font size must be managed in Tide. Digital alternatives for non-standard testing rooms include, for Braille, the digital alternative is the assistive technology with Braille figure supplement. For Braille graphs, the digital alternative is the assistive technology with Braille figure supplements. For MP3, the digital alternative is TTS. For the ATC format, the digital alternative is the assistive technology with Braille figure supplements. Please note that these digital accommodations require management of student test settings and tools in Tide. Students testing with the AT accommodation and using a screen reader and/or refreshable Braille device for the math sections can request pre-embossed tactical math graphics as supplementary materials. These materials can be requested on SSD online and ordered through the Test Ordering System, TOS. The Digital Testing Portal. This site contains the most up-to-date information regarding digital testing for the SAT, PSAT 8-9, and PSAT 10. We encourage you to visit the Digital Testing Portal at digitaltesting.collegeboard.ca. collegeboard.org and practice giving the test in the digital test preview and have students preview the digital test experience. Pre-testing AT devices. Assistive technology devices can be tested using the digital test preview through a secure browser as a method of determining if a device works with the assessment. In addition, schools and districts can use the digital test preview through a secure browser to evaluate devices to ensure their functions are consistent with those allowed by the College Board Services for Students with Disabilities. If the digital accommodation supports within the digital test preview do not meet the student testing needs, the test coordinator or SSD coordinator will arrange for alternate accommodation supports, such as paper textbook, reader, etc. The appendix that follows includes helpful resources such as example of TTS rules, streamline mode, color contrast samples, Zoom font size print equivalents, timing charts. Examples of the TTS rules and the alternative text descriptions are provided. The read text only accommodation renders the alternative text short description or textual equivalent for an image regardless of where that text resides. The alternative text short attribute is intended for a variety of student disabilities, including visual, cognitive, or print. The read text and graphics, and optimized for screen reader, renders the alternative text long description where the equivalent alternative text short cannot be presented succinctly, and therefore a long description is required to convey the information. The long description attribute is intended primarily for screen reader users or those who use the native speech synthesizer but require the detailed description to process the information. In many instances, the descriptions are similar, example, equations, expressions, etc. Because the information needed should only include information that provides context and not superfluous visual features. In the streamline mode, the items are presented sequentially without a split screen. For example, items with passage sets will display the passage above the items. This feature is automatically set enabled with the assistive technology AT accommodation. Streamline mode is required for Zoom font size greater than level 4 for optimum presentation. Must be manually selected and tied or turned on. Example of the streamline mode with Zoom, font size level 5, is presented to highlight the need for the linear presentation of the item passage set. Example of the streamline mode with the assistive technology AT presentation is provided to highlight the modifications included for screen readers as compared to the standard presentation. The AT presentation includes on-screen text to help visually impaired students to interact with the content. Examples of the various color contrast options available in the digital testing application are visually presented. More examples of the various color contrast options available in the digital testing application. Font size equivalencies. This is a useful guide for determining the digital equivalent to the large print fonts. Timing charts for the SAT, PSAT 8-9, and PSAT 10. Please refer to each of the respective digital accommodated manuals for specific details, including the scripts, as provided in the SAT Digital Testing Accommodated Manual, PSAT 8-9 Digital Testing Accommodated Manual, PSAT 10 Digital Testing Accommodated Manual. We have come to the end of the presentation. Thank you for joining the Digital Accommodations overview. Contact information is provided. I encourage you to please review all the resources provided on the digital testing portal at digitaltesting.collegeboard.org.